Ola, good afternoon. How are you?
John, it appears that today you're in a new place.
I am in a new location. I am broadcasting live from Miami, Florida, and it's absolutely beautiful here.
I am totally jealous. I'm in London, my usual spot. It's like gale force winds outside right now. So I'm very jealous.
Oh, yeah, you should be because it is beautiful here. Listen, we've got a great show today. We've got a guest. The topic, what are we going to discuss today? What's the topic?
I am so excited because today we're going to talk about DORA.
Wait a minute, Dora? That's one of my kids' favorites, Dora the Explorer, right?
Wrong. we're gonna ask our colleague to come in and tell us all about the real Dora or the new Dora that's emerging in Europe right now, and probably has some repercussions elsewhere within the world shortly as well. So we're going to talk about data and resiliency and some really interesting subjects, and not Dora the Explorer. Although we're going to explore the subject of Dora. So that's what we're going to do today.
That's awesome. Let's bring Marcus on. That'd be awesome.
Let's bring him on.
Marcus.
Hi, Ola. Hi, John. How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you very much.
Where are you coming? Where are you coming from today?
Well, I was outside with my little son and strolling within 18 degrees. It's the first day of sun since, I would say 5 days bad weather. So it was a perfect day.
That's great.
Wonderful. Hey, Marcus, listen, I was a little disappointed. We thought we were going to talk about Dora the Explorer, but my understanding is Dora stands for something much more important than a cute cartoon. Tell us a little bit more about what Dora stands for, what's the acronym, and then why we should be focused on this right now.
Yeah, abbreviations is always a difficult thing, right? If you don't understand in which part of the world you are at the moment. We're also not talking about DevOps and metrics related to DORA, which is another abbreviation where DORA can come into. But I'm more from a compliance perspective, and that is something which is called Digital Operational Resilience Act. It's part of the EU's digital finance package, which aims to harmonize, the regulations in Europe, and here in particular, we're looking at the cybersecurity regulations across Europe, and the aim is interesting because it's about to support the technology development, but also protection of the consumers and provide financial stability to them. If you read the preamble of what the EU put together, it's very interesting because it's not about compliance per se. It's about risk management and to give resilience to the sector. Resilience is key. There is something very interesting happening at the moment to the financial sector in the US, where the bank, one famous of the banks are at the moment impacted, and it has an impact to consumers, but also to businesses. But this is more security related, so I'm not going into the details which are happening at the moment in the States. The good thing is it's not about compliancy per se. It's about to have that resilience to get this risk managed, and the EU is accepting that something can happen. And that is really the first time, if you look at regulations that you need to stick to the rules and regulations. If you're not, then you will be penalized. This time it is, if you read through the ideas, it's I would say a big step forward to the industry in Europe.
Marcus, is it just in the EU? Is it across all of Europe? Is it already in place? Are banks the only ones who are impacted? You see, I have a million questions.
Oh yeah. Well, let me try to answer those. Structurally, it is for EU member states. Those needs to follow the rules which put the EU together. But if you're working within the EU, like an American bank or something which are not part of the EU, or the UK, which is not part of EU any longer,
Yep.
they also need to stick to the new rules and regulations. It was officially launched in January this year, and allows a 2 years implementation time, which means then in January 2025, everyone needs to follow the rules and regulations. From an applicability, it is really a kind of the entire financial sector and everyone playing in that sector. It is banks, it is insurance, it is payment institutes, it's crypto assets. If you're traders, you will be part of it. And then there is something completely new. It includes the so-called critical third-party providers. So the supervision goes away from an institute perspective and will include their providers. And providers is a very, very undefined term. So it will include data center providers, data analytics, software, computer services.
Wow.
It will be big. And
yeah, that's a big ecosystem, right? I mean, I'm thinking of all the clients that I work with who many of them have third-party IT providers in some form in their environment, but they also have potentially, I'm thinking of a BPO, let's say a retail organization that has a BPO to do payment processing. Suddenly, yeah, the term provider becomes hard to define, I suppose. I think the other thing that comes to mind as well is, even though it may only be applicable to the EU, my head goes to GDPR, right? Very similar, rolled out in a regulatory manner for the EU, but quickly got adopted to some level. It may have been a little bit different, but to some level, that adoption has begun to spread. And they're using the GDPR in that instance, they're using the GDPR standard as sort of a standard that they can at least leverage outside of even, that specific policy. Do you think the same thing's going to happen to DORA? Because I've always been a little bit fascinated that cybersecurity is so important. Resiliency and risk management are so important. And yet we have very little industry standards or regulations related to it. So I'd be interested in your view of how you could see this potentially spreading.
So I do think it's a very good comparison to GDPR. I think it will be a real deal breaker if you cannot comply to those rules and regulations, in particular if you're a service provider. So what the EU is doing within the next 18 months, they're trying to determine who is a critical third-party service provider in their eyes. It will be a discussion, at least that's what they're saying. So they reach out to their few of providers which could be determined as critical. They have a chance to answer. So it should be a conversation going on. But on the other hand, if you're not on the list, you can opt in if you want. So it will be a sales argument, in my view, if you want to be part of the financial industry, to have some sort of rubber stamp to say, yes, we are able to comply to that. And just to make it a little bit more difficult, if you're at the moment as a provider working outside of the EU, everything is established outside of the EU. The EU is, with DORA, giving you the task to create a subsidiary in the EU. Okay, because they want to have the direct reach in the EU, in a member state, any kind of. But for example, if you're just established in the US and you're a super good service provider to do, I don't know, artificial intelligence, right? Where you think, oh, maybe that's not super banking related, but that's data analytics. So you will be part of the radar. So then you would need to have a subsidiary in Europe. So it will be fun. So
yeah, and I love you that you brought that up, because it also brings me back to what you said earlier. It's not just banks. I mean, I think of insurance. So take the AI discussion. Suddenly you see because it's got such a broad spread around sector, technology now becomes also as broad. And as you say, in order to play in the sandbox, if they're going to require me to have a subsidiary, I've got to make some real business decisions, because obviously it takes time, effort, and money to establish that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, Marcus, I have a question. When we think about this ramifications for U.S. entities, both service provider and bank, it sounds like it will have an impact because ultimately American banks are doing business in the EU and will obviously have to comply with DORA, as well as service providers. What is the auditing process like? Is there a formalized auditing process that will be utilized to keep people in compliance?
Well, we need to differentiate basically from now until DORA come into effect. That is 24 months, not even any longer, looking from January, and then what happens afterwards. So now that is very interesting and gives also some challenges. The EU with their newly formed committee, they will create some technical standards within 18 months. And then they put them out, and then you need to comply to them. So this is an interesting fact, because then you have just 6 months left to comply to something which someone else was working on 18 months. Okay?
Wow.
What the committees are saying, we want to involve the industry, which is good, right? I mean, that is a positive side effect, that they really have conversation flowing. On the other hand, it's a challenge. Can you think of that you will basically show all your weaknesses to an auditor or to supervisory authority in that conversation? So that is a challenge. How do you find something which for the entire industry is important and should be something which is also giving you some relief? For example, today you need to have 10 or 20 different reporting obligations, depending on which country you're working in. For example, if you have an incident, right, then you need to report that. It could be different formats, different information, different timelines. That is part of the harmonization. You bring everything together and say, hey guys, this time we just have one template we need to follow, one timeline we need to follow. That's the information we need to share. That gives some relief for cross-border businesses, right? What happens with the providers is that conversation I was saying. So they are putting some quantitative and qualitative criteria together, put a list together, and then they say, okay, provider ABC, we determine you as critical, please respond to that. There's also a conversation ongoing. Once we have an effect, then we run through a standard audit process.
So it will be an audit process rather than, let's call it a certification process, where you certify yourself as being compliant and then you use that certification, because sometimes it works that way and sometimes it's kind of an after the fact. Do you think it's going to be maybe a little of both, or any idea how it might pan out in the end?
Yeah, so I do believe it will be a kind of both.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you cannot audit the entire industry from 2025, right? It will be something where you cherry pick and we'll give it a try. Also, the authorities will learn, because, I mean, whatever you put together now might be not wrong, but maybe you need to tweak it a little bit, right? So they would put some principles together, some guidelines. That is kind of level 1. What is missing is level 2 and level 3, something you need to implement. Everyone needs to learn, the organization, but also the authorities needs to learn. So it will be a kind of moving target. And I think the industry needs to learn together, which is on one hand, again, the positive side effect, that sharing culture. That is something which basically not happened so far, or not in a way as we wish for. But I do believe, given DORA gives that attitude in their principles, and that is something positive, but everything needs to learn together.
Hey, Marcus, if I'm a service provider now, what I'm thinking about is 24 months. This is going to become, more formalized, like, audits will begin, et cetera. And if I've got renewals coming up, or if I'm working on contracts, do you think enterprise clients will start to add into the RFP process, or even our process at ISG, around DORA compliance or DORA certified, to Ola's point? And when will that begin? Is that going to happen in 6 months, 12 months? Because to me, I think, I don't know if I'd want to renew with somebody unless I knew like they were on the road to DORA compliance, right?
I do absolutely agree to that. So I think what is going to happen, if we now see a new RFP, there will be statements about you need to be compliant to DORA. You need to make sure that you put effort into your situation as a company, as a provider, in order to comply to that. And even if maybe it's not super, super hard, but you will choose someone who's willing to go the extra mile. I mean, on the other hand, it is, the banks basically, or the institutes, insurances as well, they live that they can provide trust to their businesses or to the industry as such. And that trust will only be supported by someone else as a partner who can support that trust feeling. Everyone understands something can happen, like an incident, a security breach, whatever can happen. And that is the positive side of DORA. I just like to repeat it because it's something really new that they say, okay, we need to mitigate the risk. And if something happens to the industry, we share that out and try to see that we are not spreading across the entire industry. We try to minimize the effort. So just to come to your point, sorry, I was losing a little bit my train of thought here, but it will be into new RFPs. It will be a requirement, and I do believe if you are a provider, if you're not in a position to comply to that, you will be out in the first section, basically. Yeah, you will be ruled out.
What are your thoughts on that with regards to deals and kind of things you're seeing in the market? It probably hasn't percolated up now, but what are your thoughts in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw before. I think Marcus is right. There's liable to be something that comes into contract form that says, yeah, we don't know what the standard is yet, but you've got to agree now that you're going to comply with it when it does come out. I just think that would just be responsible of someone to do anyway, to have some sort of protection, recognizing that that protection may probably and most likely would need to be readdressed once we actually know what the standard is, how they're going to manage the standard, right? Because I just think that that's going to be the case, because it's really easy to say, well, sure, in the future, I'm going to go, help you do whatever it is you want me to do in the future. But if I can't see the future and I don't actually know what that might cost me, it's really hard for me as a provider or a client to sign up to that risk, that level of risk contractually. So I think it's going to be an interesting form that could take. I think even more interesting is we've seen this before with regulation, right, John and Marcus? I know you've seen this as well. Some of the real questions are going to be who has the major, who actually takes on that major accountability in a situation where you actually have a very integrated delivery model. It's integrated. It's not like one service provider is doing the work and the client's, doing something else. In today's world, we have multiple service providers in our environment, and we have an ecosystem in most cases with these types of clients. So the real question, I think, for me also becomes, how do I ensure that my entire ecosystem is compliant with whatever kind of rules might actually happen? And then what do I do to ensure that I offboard and onboard within that compliant ecosystem? I think those are going to be the challenges, but I'm with Marcus. Until you know what the standards are, it may be really hard. I find it fascinating that we're going to allow 18 months to define the standard, ostensibly only 6 to actually implement it. Now, if it's a lot about the standards that are already there, or largely already there, country by country by country, and it's about rationalizing them, I certainly see where a lot of these types of companies may feel a little easier with that knowledge in their pocket. essentially, because they're probably doing something already. And for them, this would actually simplify their risk management environment. But that's again, a leap of faith, because we don't know yet. We don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I think it opens up.
Just to add to that.
Sure, please.
Go ahead, Marcus.
So, I mean, one of the chapters is particularly talking about third-party risk management, right? Nothing new in the sector, but it's just enforcing that you need to have the entire supply chain under control, and you need to really have your bits and pieces. It's not about that you get a SOC 2 certificate or something like that, right? It's really going to the nitty-gritties. So it will be vital to decide for the right partner. On the other hand, the partner can be a real partner in that regard. I mean, there will be obligations you need to comply to, and the partner can help you, like reporting, right? You need to have the information at the right point in the data set. Maybe a partner can put that together for you, even as integrated service integration, right, for other service providers. So I do believe it will be a proper sales argument to understand the requirements, but also how you can help your customer basically in order to comply to them.
Yeah, to comply with that requirement. I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity here. What I would get excited about here is I think it opens up a marketplace for a few different areas. One is a differentiator for service providers, right? Because if I'm able to figure this out quickly, I can really leverage that in deals, right? Fear is a driver, and so that's one I'm thinking. So either large providers because they can afford to do it, or maybe small providers because of the agility of those firms, right? So it'll be interesting to see. The second area that's intriguing is I think there's a whole consulting area around this that will open up. I'm sure ISG will be involved in that. I know you wrote a blog on this, and we'll definitely make sure we post that link. But I also think for individuals, because that audit process requires a dedicated individual inside the organization, I think there's going to be a whole new market for people that are DORA certified in the sense of they're experts in how to comply. And that's going to open up a whole new career opportunity for technologists. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's, again, a very good point. And we have not talked about that upfront. I just wanted to make that clear. It's, I mean, it's a cultural change in a company, because they used to look into silos in order to say, that's my requirement, I will solve it, done and dusted. The DORA is putting a lot of pressure on a kind of horizontal alignment, which is really new. And that is a cultural change you need to get in your mind, even if as a service provider, but also as a financial institute. And that needs to be supported by technology. It's just, you cannot do legwork, right? Excel will not work for that. You need to have the right tools and processes in place in order to get that done and to manage that risk. It is really huge, and it's a change to look just from pillars to horizontal alignment. Someone needs to own it. So that is a new career path, because you need to understand business-wise what's going to happen, but you also need to understand technology, data flows, etc. So it is, I think, something completely new, and it will also open up from provider side. I do think opportunities to find new use cases where you can have additional sales in it. Yes.
That's great. So listen, Marcus, we've hit our time, which is amazing. This was quick. I can't even believe it. Final thoughts on DORA is we've got your blog. We'll make sure we post that link for people to learn a little bit more. Any 30 seconds, any last tip for somebody, if you're a service provider, what they should do next to quickly make sure that they're going to be prepared for this change?
Well, if you're a financial institute, look at the entire stack. I mean, and don't get lost in the details. The details will come later, but try to identify the gaps and the additionals. I think that is super important, because there are elements in where you say it's a given and I know about it, but there will be additions and new requirements. And as a service provider, get used to it and take a strategic decision. Are you willing to join the industry or not? Because it will be expensive, as Ola said. there will be a first hit on your margins, but in the midterm, I think it is the right industry to invest, but it is a strategic decision you need to take because you need to build new capabilities. You need to hire resources, which are scarce at the moment, as everyone understands. So that's my 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer.
Marcus, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Fascinating subject.
Take care. Thanks so much, Marcus.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
Have a good
you.
evening. Bye.
Ola, it just goes to show you, like, there's just constantly something new here, and security and cybersecurity in particular is just not going to go away anytime soon. So DORA is not only going to just be in the EU, but certainly it's going to impact the globe, don't you think?
I do. And I think, you know, GDPR, we learned a lot of lessons of, you know, about that rollout. It's still a little squeaky. The wheels still squeak a little bit when it comes to GDPR. We're having discussions about ESG within the EU in terms of some form of regulatory environment around them. And I think the EU is certainly the leader in attempting to ensure that they have some level of, and it's not about, I like what he said, it's not about compliance. It's really about ensuring that everyone has the same focus on the ability to manage their risk. And I think what they're saying is everyone has a similar or a shared responsibility in that fact and not in these little silos. So I really like the way that Marcus put that. Really fascinating subject.
Yeah, lots more to learn, and we will over the next 24 months, but this has been enlightening. So thanks so much, Ola. We'll talk to you soon, and I'll be back in Connecticut after this wonderful time in Miami.
Enjoy your time there. Enjoy your time at the beach.
Bye-bye.
Bye, John.